Welcome to the SPHR Deep Dive. Today, we're cutting through the complexities of U.S. employment law. Really critical stuff if you're aiming for that SPHR certification. Think of this as your essential, hopefully engaging study guide. We want to distill these dense statutes into, clear, actionable insights to help you not only ace your exam, but really master these principles for your HR career.
Exactly. This isn't just about memorizing facts for a test, right? Understanding these federal laws is, well, it's the bedrock of ethical, compliant HR and, ultimately effective practice. We're going to dissect 5 cornerstone acts, Title VII, ADA, GINA, and FMLA. We'll explore their scope, your core obligations, and those nuanced areas that frequently challenge HR pros, both in the real world and definitely on the SPHR exam. Our goal is for you to grasp not just what the laws are, but why they exist, and crucially, how to apply them with confidence.
Let's crack open the first of these cornerstones, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act from 1964. This is really foundational, isn't it? What are the absolute essentials we need to internalize here?
Okay. At its heart, Title VII makes it illegal to discriminate in employment based on 5 core protected characteristics. That's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. And this applies broadly to employers with 15 or more employees. That includes part-timers. And public and federal employers, well, they're covered regardless of size. It's incredibly far-reaching. Covers basically every aspect of employment, hiring, firing, pay, promotions, training, even the work environment itself. The key is that you can't take an adverse employment action because someone belongs to one of these groups.
That's incredibly broad, and it leads us to these terms, disparate treatment and disparate impact. These always seem ripe for confusion. Can you help clarify those, especially with our SPHR focus in mind?
Absolutely. Let's try to break it down simply. Think of disparate treatment as, well, intentional discrimination. It's when an employer deliberately treats someone differently because of their protected class, like saying flat out, we don't hire women for this role. Explicit bias. Disparate impact, though, is more insidious. It's when a policy or practice looks neutral on the surface, maybe even seems fair. But in practice, it unintentionally ends up harming a protected group disproportionately. Like maybe a strength test for a desk job that, tends to screen out more women or older applicants, even without any bad intent.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you right, even if there's no malicious intent, no bad guy twirling his mustache, an employer can still be in violation. That's a critical point.
Precisely. And this is where a key HR metric comes in, one you'll definitely see questions about on the SPHR. It's the 80% rule, sometimes called the 4/5 rule. Basically, if the selection rate for a protected group is less than 80% of the rate for the group with the highest rate, it's a red flag, potential disparate impact. So let's say 20% of male applicants get hired, but only 14% of female applicants. You divide 14 by 20, that's 70%, or 0.70. Since that's below 80%, or 0.80, it immediately signals that HR needs to investigate that selection process. Now, employers can defend such a policy, but they have to show it's job-related and consistent with business necessity, which means proving the requirement is truly essential for the job, and there isn't a less discriminatory way to achieve the same goal.
Right, so HR needs to be proactive, analyzing their processes, not just reacting. And beyond that direct discrimination, Title VII also tackles things like hostile work environments and, crucially, protecting people who speak up. Tell us about retaliation.
You've hit on 2 huge areas. Yes, Title VII explicitly prohibits harassment. That includes sexual harassment, which could be quid pro quo, this for that, or creating a hostile work environment through unwelcome conduct that's severe or pervasive enough to alter the conditions of employment. And yes, retaliation, absolutely forbidden. Employers cannot punish an employee in any way for complaining about discrimination and filing a charge or even just participating in an investigation. HR's role here is paramount. You need clear, accessible complaint processes, and you have to foster a culture where employees genuinely feel safe reporting issues. No fear of reprisal.
Okay, quick point for our SPHR candidates. I know the interpretation of sex under Title VII has evolved significantly. Can you touch on that?
Absolutely, and this is critical. Recent Supreme Court decisions, especially Bostock v. Clayton County, have made it clear. Sex discrimination under Title VII now broadly includes discrimination based on pregnancy, sexual orientation, and gender identity. This isn't just a minor detail. It's a major expansion of protections. HR professionals must know this. And while we're on nuances, remember the bona fide occupational qualification, or BFOQ. It's an extremely narrow exception. Think maybe a religious school hiring only members of its faith for religious teaching roles, or needing a specific gender for an acting part. You can't argue customer preference or Like women are more nurturing for a daycare job. That's not a BFOQ.
Got it. Super narrow. Okay, for our SPHR SETI toolkit, any mnemonic for those protected classes, help us lock them in.
Yes. You could try pre and AS. So that's pregnancy, undersex, race, a national origin, color, sex, and religion. Helps keep them straight.
Pre-ANSIS. Okay. Now, while Title VII set those broad anti-discrimination principles, the next law really changed the game for accommodating and including individuals with disabilities. Let's dive into the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA.
Yes, the ADA, passed in 1990 and then significantly broadened by the ADA Amendments Act, the ADA, in 2008. It's truly landmark legislation. Title I is the part focused on employment. Like Title VII, it applies to employers with 15 or more employees, and it forbids discrimination because of a disability across, again, all aspects of employment.
How broad is that definition of disability now, especially after the ADA in 2008?
Very broad. The ADA really emphasized that. A disability is a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And major life activities includes things like seeing, hearing, walking, learning, thinking, concentrating, even bodily functions. And crucially for HR, even conditions that are episodic, like, say, epilepsy or multiple sclerosis, or conditions that are well managed with medication, like diabetes or hypertension, they can still qualify as disabilities if they would substantially limit a major life activity when active or without mitigating measures. The focus really shifted to the impact.
Okay, and the really unique part of the ADA often is this idea of reasonable accommodation. How does that work? What do SPHR candidates need to know?
This is absolutely a hallmark of the ADA. Employers have an affirmative duty to provide reasonable accommodation to a qualified individual with a disability, unless, and this is key, doing so would cause undue hardship. Now, a qualified individual is someone who meets the job's requirements, skills, experience, education, and can perform the essential functions of the job, either with or without an accommodation. And those essential functions are the core fundamental duties, not the marginal stuff.
Can you give us a practical example? What might that look like?
Sure. Think about a deaf applicant needing a sign language interpreter for their job interview. That's usually reasonable. Or maybe an employee develops carpal tunnel syndrome and needs voice recognition software and an ergonomic keyboard to keep doing their computer-based job. Likely reasonable. An accommodation is reasonable if it works, if it allows the employee to perform the essential functions, and it doesn't fundamentally alter the job or the business operations or cause excessive cost. Undue hardship is a high bar. It means significant difficulty or expense looking at the employer's overall resources, size, and the nature of its operations. A $100 specialized keyboard for one employee, probably reasonable. Shutting down a production line for modifications might be undue hardship. The absolute key for HR here is the interactive process. That's the required good faith conversation between the employer and the employee to figure out what limitations exist and what potential accommodations could work. And a common pitfall, especially for the exam. Don't confuse ADA accommodation with FMLA leave. ADA is about enabling work, often through adjustments. FMLA is about providing leave from work. Also remember, current illegal drug use is not protected under the ADA. And like the others, ADA prohibits disability-based harassment and retaliation.
Got it. Interactive process is key. Any mnemonic for the ADA to help us remember?
For ADA, maybe think can do. Can the person perform essential functions? Is accommodation needed? Will it cause no undue hardship?
Can do. I like that. Okay, we've covered discrimination based on inherent traits and disability. But what about age? Let's unpack the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, the ADEA.
Right, the ADA. This one goes back to 1967. It specifically protects workers who are 40 years of age and older. And that's a key SPHR exam point. It does not protect younger workers from age discrimination, only those 40 and over. It applies to employers with 20 or more employees, so a slightly higher threshold than Title VII and ADA. And like the others, it bans age-based discrimination in all terms and conditions of employment, hiring, firing, pay, benefits, promotions, and yes, also age-based harassment and retaliation.
Are there any interesting nuances or differences with the ADEA compared to Title VII?
There are a couple of key ones. One is that the ADEA generally allows employers to favor an older worker over a younger worker, even if both workers are over 40. So promoting a 50-year-old over a 42-year-old based on, say, experience is usually fine under ADEA, even though both are in the protected age group. The idea was to prevent situations where slightly younger but still older workers were constantly replacing the most senior employees. Also, The BFOQ for age is extremely narrow, mostly limited to certain public safety jobs like mandatory retirement ages for pilots or law enforcement, where age is demonstrably linked to safety performance.
So HR really needs to watch out for language in job descriptions. Things like seeking recent graduates or young dynamic team. Those are red flags.
Exactly. That kind of language screams potential age bias. And just like with other laws, making fun of someone's age, calling them grandpa, creating a hostile environment based on age that's harassment under the ADA needs to be addressed.
Okay, how do we anchor this one for the SPHR? The key takeaway.
Super simple. ADEA equals 40 or aged. Remember that 40 is the magic number.
All right, moving to more recent territory now and something quite specific. The Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act, or GINA, this feels very 21st century. What's the core idea?
GINA, from 2008, is all about preventing discrimination based on genetic information. It's a powerful privacy protection in the employment context. It covers an individual's own genetic test results, but also, importantly, the genetic tests of their family members and their family medical history. So an employer cannot use the fact that, say, your mother had breast cancer or there's a family history of heart disease to make decisions about your job, hiring, firing, assignments, insurance eligibility.
Wow, that's significant. So what does that mean for HR practically? What can't they ask or collect?
It's very strict. GINA basically forbids employers from requesting, requiring, or purchasing genetic information about employees or their family members. There are a few very narrow exceptions, like information needed for FMLA certification or if it's part of a voluntary wellness program. But even then, strict confidentiality rules apply, and the information must never be used for discriminatory purposes. A manager, even well-intentioned, can't ask an employee, hey, does diabetes run in your family? That question itself could violate GINA.
I can see how managers, just trying to be caring, could easily step over that line accidentally. What's a common pitfall here for SPHR prep?
That unintentional acquisition is definitely the biggest pitfall. Think about those health risk assessments in wellness programs. If they ask about family medical history, they need to be carefully structured to be truly voluntary and compliant with GINA's rules. You can't penalize someone for not providing that family history. And, yes, just like the other laws, GINA also prohibits harassment based on genetic information, like coworkers teasing someone about a family history of a disease, and it includes strong anti-retaliation protections. It applies to employers with 15 or more employees, same threshold as Title VII and AD.
Okay, a way to remember GINA.
Well, the name itself is pretty descriptive. GINA, Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. Or maybe just think, genes in, no action. Keep genetic info out of employment decisions.
All right. This next one addresses something vital for so many working families: job security during major life events. Let's talk about the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, from 1993.
Yes, FMLA, a critical piece of legislation. It guarantees eligible employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid job-protected leave per 12-month period for certain specific family or medical reasons. The job-protected part is key. It means you generally get your same or an equivalent job back, and your health insurance continues under the same conditions as if you were working.
Okay. Eligible is always the word that jumps out with FMLA. It seems like there are several conditions to meet. Can you break down who qualifies?
It is definitely multi-layered and a prime spot for SPHR traps. Let's break it down. First, the employer must be covered. That means public agencies, schools, and private sector employers with 50 or more employees working within 75 miles of the employee's worksite. That 50-75 rule is crucial. And they need to have had 50 employees for at least 20 work weeks in the current or preceding year. Then the employee must be eligible. They need to have worked for that employer for at least 12 months, doesn't have to be consecutive, and they must have worked at least 12,250 hours during the 12-month period immediately before the leave starts. And he, of course, work at a location where the employer meets that 50 employees within 75 miles rule.
Phew, okay. That's a lot of numbers and conditions. Can you walk us through an example?
Sure. Let's say Maria has worked full-time for the same company for 3 years. The company has 200 employees total, all within a 60-mile radius. So, employer covered. Maria works 40 hours a week, so she easily meets the 12-month and 1,250-hour tests. If Maria needs surgery that requires 6 weeks of recovery, she's eligible for FMLA leave. Her job is protected, benefits continue.
Makes sense. And what are those specific qualifying reasons for taking FMLA leave?
The main ones are the birth of a child and to care for the newborn within 1 year of birth, placement of a child for adoption or foster care, and to care for the newly placed child within 1 year, to care for the employee's spouse, child, or parent who has a serious health condition, or for the employee's own serious health condition that makes them unable to perform the essential functions of their job. And serious health condition is defined. It usually involves inpatient care or ongoing treatment by a healthcare provider, more than just a common cold or minor ailment. Pregnancy complications and prenatal care qualify. Also important. FMLA allows for intermittent leave or leave on a reduced schedule basis when medically necessary for a serious health condition. Think regular chemo treatments or physical therapy appointments. And like all these laws, FMLA has strong anti-retaliation rules. You can't interfere with someone's FMLA rights or discriminate against them for taking leave.
What's a really common point of confusion for SPHR candidates when it comes to FMLA?
Definitely distinguishing FMLA leave from ADA accommodation. They can sometimes run concurrently, but they serve different purposes.
Yeah.
FMLA is about leave, ADA is about working with an accommodation. Also, nailing that serious health condition definition, remembering it, requires more than just feeling unwell for a day or two, and always double-checking those eligibility numbers, especially the employer size, 50, and the employee hours, 1250, and tenure, 12 months. The 75-mile radius test often trips people up too.
Is there a quick mnemonic for those FMLA eligibility numbers?
Yes, the classic HR jingle. Just remember,
Yeah.
12, 12, 12, 50, 50. That's 12 months of service, up to 12 weeks of leave, 1,250 hours worked in the prior 12 months, and 50 employees within 75 miles. Drill that one.
12, 12, 12, 50, 50.
Okay.
You know, listening to all this, there's a really strong theme running through every single one of these laws.
You're absolutely right. A powerful unifying theme across Title VII, ADA, GINA, and FMLA is the robust anti-retaliation protection. Every single one of these laws makes it illegal for an employer to punish an employee or applicant for asserting their rights. That includes complaining about discrimination, filing a charge with the EEOC, participating as a witness in an investigation, or even just internally opposing practices they reasonably believe are unlawful. For HR, fostering a culture of no retaliation is not just policy, it's fundamental. You need to state it clearly, train managers on it relentlessly because retaliation can be subtle, and investigate any hint of reprisal vigorously. For your SPHR exam and your daily practice, the motto has to be, no fear to report.
Okay, so beyond the core principles, let's quickly recap some critical numbers and common SPHR exam traps that listeners should really lock down.
Okay, key numbers. First, that adverse impact ratio. The 80% or 4/5 rule. Remember how to calculate it. Selection rate of lower group, selection rate of higher group. If it's less than 0.80, investigate. Second, FMLA eligibility. Drill those 12, 12, 12, 50, 50 criteria. Be ready for scenarios that test each part. Maybe someone meets the hours, but not the tenure, or the company size is just under 50, which leads right into the eligibility traps. The SPHR loves questions where someone seems eligible but fails one criterion, often the employer size or the 75-mile radius for FMLA, or the employee count thresholds for Title VIATA, 15+, or ADEA, 20+, other pitfalls. Confusing FMLA leave periods with ADA reasonable accommodation, like requests for light duty. Understanding the difference between retaliation and legitimate performance management, though timing is always suspect if discipline follows closely on a complaint. Remembering these laws generally apply to employees, not independent contractors. And drilling home just how narrow that BFOQ exception really is for Title VII and ADA.
So wrapping this all up, what does this deep dive mean for your SPHR preparation and, more broadly, your journey as an HR professional?
Well, truly understanding Title VII, ADA, GINA, and FMLA, and especially that cross-cutting principle of anti-retaliation, it really equips you not just to pass an exam, which is important, but to build and maintain workplaces that are fair, compliant, and ultimately more successful because they leverage talent equitably. It's about moving beyond just risk avoidance. It's about actively fostering equity, dignity, and opportunity.
Absolutely. As you, our listener, reflect on these laws, what stands out, what resonates with your own experiences or challenges?
And as you continue studying, keep in mind that while these are U.S. laws, they reflect global trends toward workplace fairness. But here's a final thought to chew on. As technology like AI reshapes hiring and performance management, and as personalized medicine reveals more about our individual predispositions, how might these innovations challenge our current understanding of discrimination, disability, or even genetic privacy? How will HR need to adapt these foundational legal principles, Title VII, ADA, GINA, to ensure fairness in the future we're only beginning to imagine? That's the ongoing challenge and opportunity for HR leaders.